Steve, this is great. And also, it's like late. It's like an awkward time. So I hope I'm not disturbing dinner.
No, we already had dinner. We went out and had a pizza, so we're
Nice.
okay. Um,
Nice.
I know it's late for you. It's like what, 8 o'clock, huh?
8 o'clock, but I'm good to go. This is how I make it happen.
All right.
Could make excuses or make it happen.
Let me start. Let me start interviewing you. Let me start asking you
Sure.
a few questions.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I haven't prepared worth shit here. We're just gonna wing it here.
That's the best. Those are the best.
Tell me what your morning is like, Zach. Like, when do you wake up, and what's like the first 3 hours of your day?
Yes. So depends on the time of the year. So now I'm coaching at the high school level. So I wake up at 5. I go downstairs, make a cup of tea. I like to wake up. My rule is get out of bed and work on writing before the dogs want to get off the couch.
Oh, really? Uh-huh.
That is the rule. So I'm married. I've got 2 kids. So I need to get this kind of, Tony Robbins used to call it the hour of power. And when I learned about that, it was like half my lifetime ago. I was in my early 20s. And then now as I've gotten into writing, I've learned to really control that morning before any interruptions start happening. So I make tea in the morning, take that tea, come downstairs, and I start writing. So I have not too many options with my writing. So my one option might be I'm writing, sending out a newsletter. And I take that newsletter very seriously because I feel like these are the people that actually read their email. They signed up for something. They're not the people that are saying, well, I don't want to get an email. I just want to scroll through Facebook, or I just want to see what he does on Instagram. I don't want to write to those people. So when I write, I don't even open up my phone. My phone stays on airplane and do not disturb mode. So I'm like the boss of that. If I'm
Ah,
not sending out an email, maybe I'm writing a blog. Currently,
by the
I'm
way,
actually, yes, awesome. When did you
thank you
get
very
that?
much for this.
I sent that to you how many years ago? A while
Oh, a
ago?
while ago.
Maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, okay. So you're right. First thing is writing.
First thing, it's tea and writing. I stopped drinking coffee maybe, I think this December is like 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I've been doing that, Steve, for about 15 years, writing in either an almost daily email. I used to, the blog in those early days before 2010 was very popular. So I would do a lot of blogging. Right now I'm working on, believe it or not, a fiction book, but it's
Ah,
like
that's great. I love it. That's great.
it's been
I thought
really,
you were going to say that you woke up early and you went to the gym or you were doing stuff like that.
I
So I
do,
didn't
I
realize that.
do, but the writing happens first. So I'll write for
Why?
maybe, I just feel like it's almost therapeutic for me.
Uh-huh.
And I bounce around a lot when I talk, but when I write, I never got into writing until I think I was a senior in high school, and we had to write these college application essays, and you had to have like a creative story. And I was in a class that was prep. It was taking you step by step to apply to college and be
Uh-huh.
accepted. And I remember the story I shared. This is where I got into writing, was my senior year. I remember being at my girlfriend's house late, and there was a McDonald's in the area, and I was starving. So I said, I'm going to go to McDonald's, go through the drive-through. And I'm going through the drive-through, and somebody knocks on the back of my car at a Mazda 626. And it was late. It was just shy of midnight. I turn around, nobody. I look front and center, and there's a guy in the passenger, looking in. He's like, buddy, can I order with you, because they won't let me go through the drive-through. I'm walking. I don't have a car. So I said, yeah, what do you want? He opens my car and gets in. And I wrote about the story and how he spoke to me. It was like in a kind of a sketchy part of town with
Uh-huh.
these like shady, like studio apartments. And he was in those apartments, and he's like telling me about how we're waiting on this line. And he's telling me how he doesn't have a car, and how he's like he's a former Marine, telling me how he knows how to kill somebody with his own 2 hands. And, this is all while going through the drive-through. So I kind of dump this whole story. And I remember as I wrote this story, it became like many pages. And so the teacher was like, Zach, you need like a page and a half. Like this is, I don't know, 8 pages. She's like, nobody's going to read this.
Uh-huh.
And I just remember kind of getting lost in the writing. So writing for me became like this therapy in the morning, but so is lifting weights, so is training. And so I drink my tea and I write. When I'm done with my tea and maybe done writing, if I have the opportunity to train in the morning, I'll do that. So my schedule, it goes by the seasons. You know, now I'm at a high school, but the years before I worked at a university. So when I worked at a university, if I was going in, I was up early writing, then I'd go to the university. If I wasn't going to the university, I'd write and then train. And not ironically, when I would train, I felt most creative. So in my kind of field, I do a lot of those, you know, these videos on Instagram and YouTube. And I always found that I was most creative when I would exert myself physically. And so
what do you conclude from that?
I feel that if I'm not training, doing the thing that I'm talking about, and then I try to write about it, like it's a fraud.
Uh-huh.
And there's times where, let's say I don't train for 3 days. I say to myself, well, have you actually earned the right to write about this and to talk about this thing that you skipped because your schedule was too busy or some other BS excuse? And so the training and the writing, ironically, have been like therapies for me. Yeah.
I noticed that you used the word therapy a few times. What are you? How can I phrase this? Let me just ask you if you could. I'll sort of answer this myself, and you tell me if you agree with it.
Yeah.
I feel when I wake up in the morning, and I've felt this my whole life, like the day, the waiting day, the empty waiting day, is a hostile force that if I allow it to control me or to sort of, it'll become chaotic, you know, and I will sort of spiral into a bad sense. And so I'm trying to define therapy as I would define it. So for me, I feel getting up in the morning, I need to sort of take control of the day one way or another. And for me, it's the same. It's not writing for me, oddly enough. I don't do that till much later in the day.
Interesting.
For me, it's training, even though I'm not training anywhere near the level you are or any of the people you're coaching.
Yeah.
But I do that because I feel like I could say it's therapy too, but in a way, it's sort of establishing a rhythm, establishing a sense of discipline, a sense of order. And I feel like I'm going up sort of against the impending chaos inside my own mind. Does that ring a bell with you at all, Zach?
If I whittled it down, Steve, what runs through my mind, and I throw this phrase out a lot, is I say, own the day or the day will own you. And I will not lie. There have been days where I said I was going to train, but then my kids woke up. Then my wife needed me to do something. Then my training got away from me. And I remember, like I've told my wife, I said, if you ever think I'm in a bad mood, just let me go to the gym. I'll deadlift, I'll squat, I'll come back. I'll come back a better person. And so having the family, and I've always had kind of these, 2 jobs, so to speak. I would kind of coach during the day somewhere, and then I would be running my gym/business in the afternoon, evening, because we train predominantly athletes. So they're in school during the day. And so I've always felt that if I don't control my time, I don't really use that word time management, then I'm like you, the day, then everything starts controlling you. And it's the worst feeling to go to sleep at night knowing you did not really put something out there. You didn't put your magic out there. And when I say the word therapy, do you remember that movie Point Break with Patrick Swayze?
There's 2 of them, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't actually never watch the second one, but I remember Point Break. I think that movie was out in like 1990 or 89, but he was talking about surfers, and he said it's this place where you lose yourself and you find yourself. It's like getting your demons out, yet finding the good inside you. When I write, I'm really like getting things out of me. And when I train, it's the same. I'm getting out whatever negativity is in me, or it's like an art form for me. And that's probably also why, like, I don't really fit in the world of this fitness industry or the strength and conditioning industry, because I never subscribed to these are the rules of training. It must start like this, or it has to be so, like this. And, in my through my early teenage years, when I started training, I was going to these different gyms. And so I got exposed to how certain gyms operated. And then when I was 18, I joined a gym like right outside of, we call it the hood, right? The projects. And before going to this gym, I had heard about it. I had seen some videos about it. And when I read about the gym, it was called Diamond Gym. The owner said that the gym had no rules. And that's why he would let the guys park their motorcycles on the sidewalk in front of the gym, because it was reminiscent of like the Wild West saloons where the cowboys would park their horses. And the music was loud, so it would discourage people from talking. So they would just train. And he said, I don't tell them, don't drop the weights. I don't tell them anything, because then it disrupts their art of training. And so my training and my writing have never followed, this is how it should start. I've listened to, a lot of your interviews and read, and I know you said your partner, Sean, was like, there's always the beginning, the middle, and the end. Right, there's act 1, act 2, and act 3. But sometimes it feels so good to not follow those rules, because I don't know where it came from, but I never liked fitting in. I never liked being in, a quote unquote normal anything. And so the training and the writing for me are the things where I lose myself and find myself. And if I'm not doing those things, I'm not probably the most pleasant person to be around, because I need to get that stuff out of me.
When you said that it was like an art form.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit when you're working out?
Yes. Well, I remember listening to a friend of mine. She was very big into art, and she was talking about how she worked at an elementary school, and she gave this like real basic assignment for the kids, and all the kids but one colored inside whatever this outline was. The other kid kind of colored everywhere and did his own thing. And she, explained to the kids that art does not have to be in this outline that you had. It could be anything you want. So when I say I'm training, my training is never, some people, they identify as, I'm a weightlifter, I'm a power lifter, I'm a bodybuilder. For me, I like anything. I'll train with stones. I'll train outside, inside. I'll go to a, quote unquote regular gym. And I just feel like it's an expression of who I am at the time. If you go through these like phases in life where you're more intense, you're more aggressive, then you go through these other phases in life where you're trying to test yourself and, do I still have it? All right, I'm older. Am I still tough? And so to me, it's like this new creation every day. And my buddy, ironically, he's a strength coach for the Atlanta Falcons. And every week he goes on the whiteboard and draws something with some sort of quote. It might be a drawing of the ultimate warrior or of a superhero. And so one of the players said to him, he said, Jesse, why do you always erase your artwork every week? He goes, because the masterpiece has to start anew every week. There's always a new masterpiece. So I feel like I never feel like, oh, I've arrived. I know all I need to know about training, or all I need to know about writing. And so that's kind of what spurred me into writing this fiction. Was I was finding myself bored talking about typical training, strength and conditioning stuff. I was like, who the hell wants to hear more about how to squat? It just gets to me so boring. So I started writing about experiences I had, but then I twisted the story into maybe what I wish would have happened from it. Or I like expand it. They all have like some truth to them. Like it's like stories. So one chapter is a story of like a gym where there was it's in like, not an inner city, but it's certainly a super blue collar area, very close to inner city. And I remember when I trained there, there was just light bulbs. There was no lights. There was no nice light fixtures. And I remember the owner like calling the guy out for not paying. And the guy's like, I'll pay you tomorrow. I'll pay you tomorrow. And he, they got into a fight in the gym. So I kind of like expanded on it. And now this gym has an old boxing ring in the backyard where any like disagreement is settled. So I wanted to like get away from writing about the same old stuff, because there's so many books written on the same stuff that I feel like it's not going to really change anybody's life. If I write again about how you should do a push-up, there's a gazillion of those books out. But I feel like stories can change people's lives. A great book can change somebody's life.
How long have you been working on this piece of fiction?
It's been on and off. So we're mid-September now. It's been on and off through the summer. Probably started in like mid-July. And so it's not every morning I write on it. And I don't have a lot of time now. Like my current schedule is, going back to that first question, I wake up at 5. I'm really done with any kind of work or writing by 6 a.m. And then I shower and I have to hit the road by 6:30. I'm coaching from about 7:30 a.m. till about 7 p.m. So about 12 hours. Really? So then when I get home, I don't have creative juice at night. I'm
amazed that you have the juice to do this. Yeah.
Well, it gets exciting. So I feel like when I've already given so much energy to the people I'm training, it's hard to have creativity in writing. I feel like if I'm going to really get to a point where I can, like, I look at how I think when I first came across you, Steve, you had, I don't know, a smaller amount of books. I feel like you've done and created more books in a much less time in the past 5 years compared to when I first came across your work. I feel like if I keep coaching 12 hours a day, I'm probably not going to have great energy to put into writing. So I won't write unless I know that it's the timing. And that's why the morning for me, I do it before I'm out into the world. If I try writing at night,
is there a parallel between your experience writing and your experience training or working out?
How I feel from it?
Yeah. How do you feel? Like how you feel from it? Like by the time you're done, do you feel, is it a similar feeling or what?
It's different because when you're training, you feel this like physical, you feel like you've been worked. You feel like you just, you worked on like a farm, I know, when you were in those early years of being an author, right? You worked on a farm.
Yeah, I worked on a lot of things, yeah.
And so you have that like physical exhaustion. But when I write this, ironically, writing this fiction book, like it's been very emotional for me because I'm writing about like a guy. I meet this guy, then he teaches me some training methods, but then he brings me to the house and he's in a relationship, but then he takes off in his RV and he's talking to me about there's like a lot of emotions I'm going through writing this. So it's a different feeling. I don't have that physical exhaustion, but when I write, it's like you just lose yourself in this world, and then the outside noise of the world like starts to just quiet and go away. To me, it reminds me of the early books that I would read as a kid. My parents were so concerned that he doesn't read. He's not into anything but these bikes and this like working out stuff. And then I started buying these bodybuilding books, and I read Arnold's Education of a Bodybuilder, which was a blend of instruction and autobiography.
I remember that book myself. Yeah.
Yes. So it was written, I think, in the mid-'70s, but it was all story-based. And the stories pulled me in so much that, like, you thought you were him. You were, it's like you became Arnold. And so when I would do things in real life, I began imagining that I'm Arnold in these bodybuilding competitions and things like that. So when I write, that's the lose yourself and find yourself thing I talk about. And so I'm trying to write in a way where I get that feeling and the person reading whatever would be like going on in their life. You know, as you know, you have these crazy, life is just crazy, ups and downs. But I want, when somebody reads my stuff, to just, the outside world stops and they get some kind of peace from it. So there's this beautiful feeling from it. But of course, the physical training leaves you this feeling of like, I've worked. Now I've earned my right to have a breakfast.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
Yes, like I have to earn everything.
I'll tell you one thing, Zach. If you were able to write for 4 hours straight, then you will feel tired, and you will feel like like your body went through something.
Is that what your daily mark is, Steve? 4 hours?
It used to be. I used to be able to do 4 hours. That was the max. Now I could probably do 3 hours. Unless I wanted to really kill myself,
Right.
But, I can tell when I've had it. It's just like the gym, you hit a point of diminishing returns. So you sort of know, I'm going to hurt myself if I keep going now,
You start, sometimes, I'll get to a point where I'm like, this sucks. And what was really weird was, like, a month ago, I felt like my writing, my emails sucked. I was like, this sucks.
By the way, I read your stuff every morning, I'm one of your
you're
fans.
on the newsletter.
Yeah.
That's right. I got to, that blows my mind. And so somebody emailed me a month ago and said, your emails are on fire lately. And I was thinking to myself, my emails suck.
No, they're actually really, really good lately, Zach, I would say, because what's great about them is just the passion. It really almost doesn't matter what you're saying one particular day, You'll say, I just went out in the woods and I picked up stones, and I was lifting boulders, and it doesn't really matter. It's not like I'm going to go out and lift boulders or anything, but the passion that's put behind it, you sort of shame me, which is what a trainer should do, I think, I feel like I'm not living up to Zach,
I'll hear that a lot. My goal is, through the writing, to inspire people to work, to break through, because when you, like, to have that breakthrough, I heard this guy's name was Dr. Gene Landrum. He was like a big entrepreneurial studies guy. He created that early days like restaurant for kids, Chuck E. Cheese. Remember that place?
Really?
And he wrote this book on, I think it was called Entrepreneurial Genius. He wrote about all these entrepreneurs, and he said the common theme was that before they had a breakthrough, they had a breakdown. And so I feel like, ironically, I'm trying to get people to work, because it's like you break your old self and then you rebuild into a stronger self. Yeah. Do you ever feel that way, Steve, from writing? Like, you write so hard, and it's like the tearing of muscles, and they repair stronger.
Definitely. And I feel like, over the course of my life, I've had a bunch of breakdowns, I think we really kind of evolve in a stair-step pattern, and I think, in training, I think you get better in that way. You hit a wall.
Yes.
And then you're stuck, and then you break through.
You get smarter.
And I think it's the same in a single work that you're writing. You'll hit the wall at a certain point, you'll break through. And I also think it's true in a career that, year 2, you'll hit a wall, and finally you'll break through. Year 4, you'll hit another wall. I think that's just the way we evolve,
When I read and kind of try to, like, look at the timeline of your career, Steve, you started writing. Were you trying to write books, or did you start writing these, for the movies?
I started to write books first, which was probably pretty stupid.
But why do you think that was stupid?
Well, because the first thing I tried to write was a novel when I was like 23, I think, like that. I quit a job in advertising in New York City, and I went home and worked, and I was no more prepared to do that than I'd be prepared to climb Mount Everest. I didn't know enough about anything, self-discipline, none of that stuff. And I didn't know anything about writing. So it was like taking a giant tab of LSD, it just kind of blew my brains out. I couldn't handle it,
That is
I think
hilarious.
in the end it was good because, you have to rally to get out of that.
Right.
But yeah, so I definitely bit off a lot more than I could chew at the start.
Well,
Why
when
did you ask that, Zach?
well, because sometimes I listen to some of your interviews and reading books, and I just wonder where did it start? Because you've written, I'm not sure what the exact term would be called. You've written like the like you've written the
Screenplay, yeah, yeah.
screenplay, and so I didn't know that you had written it for some of the movies. Like I didn't. The King Kong story is so funny
They're all
because
terrible movies, that's for sure.
well, that was so I have such a similar story. So it was King Kong and then Above the Law. You wrote the
Yeah,
screenplay
yeah,
for
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I feel like some of these movies and Legend of Bagger Vance, they're so different. Whereas somebody like myself, I'm writing, it's always about, training. But for you, those are all pretty like different, I guess, genres
Well,
or
I was
different
sort of
worlds.
finding my way at that point. I was just lucky to even be getting paid for writing. And so I wasn't really writing from my own heart. I was just thought, well, I'd like to do a Western. I'd like to do a detective story. I'd like to do a monster movie. I just was sort of all over the lot. Like you were saying when you're starting to train, you might train like Lou Ferrigno or what, then
Yes.
whatever. So that was just a process of self-education.
Mm,
Let me ask you this. Let me go back to
yeah,
your fiction book for a
sure.
second. Do you have it laid out from start to finish? You know what you're doing, or are you kind of taking
I
it as it comes?
Yeah, I don't operate very good with rules and rigidity. I do like having a guideline. Like I even, wrote questions that I'd be asking you, but I like doing this conversation. Like, and same thing when you asked about my day, I usually have three things that I need to get done in the day. I don't make a list of 10, 20 things. It's three things. And the first thing I do in the morning is that writing. I feel like I write, my mind is very all over the place. Sometimes I remember stories that happen. I'm like, holy crap. So as I'm writing, I just let it flow. And as I'm writing these chapters, these stories sometimes come to me because I share them with the athletes I train. So what I'm doing is sometimes they train, I see them getting fatigued, and then I start giving them tips, and then I say, Crazy Eddie from Dynamic Fitness once did this. And then I bring them in and I say, you guys want to hear the story? And they're like, yes, coach, we love these stories. And I was like, all right, I'm giving you this story today. And then like the next time, if they're not working, they're like, well, we got a story. I'm like, you got to earn it. So I sometimes have like these reactionary writings, I guess, so to speak. I don't outline it. And the book, the encyclopedia that you have, the story behind that, Steve, was I was sharing stories and training tips with some friends. These guys are in California. They're big guys, very big following. They've been authors, and so I would text them certain things, and then one of the guys says, "Write a book, you fucking genius." That's how he texted me back, and I said, "I don't even know what am I going to write about. I'm going to write about squats." So they had partnered with a company that the person would like interview you over the phone, come out and interview you. Then they would hire the photographer and they did like a joint venture,
Oh, I see.
50-50. So long story short, we outlined the book. The guy comes out with the photographer. We take all these photos. It's like 2.5 days with like, I've got these high level athletes with me and we're filming like crazy. And then the interviews never happened, right? The guy, they were supposedly, the company was like night owls, like vampires. They would like work from like 10 p.m. till like 7 a.m. and then sleep all day. And so he always wanted to interview me at like 1 o'clock while I'd be coaching at a university or something. So I said to him, I said, stop being such a effing you know what. And I said, let's do these interviews and just crush this book. And he says, this book is like interfering with my quality of life. So I was like, okay, go F yourself. And I hang up the phone on him, and then I'm like, oh shit. Like, we've got like 3,000 photos. We took like 2,800 photos, 2.5 days. I had these athletes with me. And then I said to myself, I'm not writing this effing book. It's stupid. I got to train these kids. I'm not doing it. And that day, as I was thinking about it, I'm like, you know what? All those my athletes that spent days with me, they're going to say, Zach, what happened to the book? And then I'm going to have to tell them I quit, which goes against everything I tell them.
Yeah.
And so I contact the owner of the company. I buy the photos from them, which luckily were not expensive. And then Hurricane Sandy hit this tri-state area,
Right,
New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And I'm in a little beach town, Steve. And so the town's like a little over 1 square mile, maybe 1.5 miles. 1 mile from the beach, like, destroyed this town. And so 2 weeks after the storm, I'm with my wife and my kids. This is 7 years ago, almost exactly, or actually 8 years ago. So my son was 4. We're riding through the town, and you see everybody's household items piled on the sidewalk. Bed mattresses, blenders. You see people camping in the front or the back of their house because their houses were flooded. I mean, it was like a bad movie, you know? And the thing that hit me was, I remember seeing like a stuffed teddy bear. And I don't know why it hit me, but I was like, man, this town now has to get really strong. And if I just write a book about training, like, who's that going to inspire? Whose life is that going to change? So I said, I'm now going to write this book, and I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be a blend of training and stories of constantly overcoming struggle. And I don't know why that teddy bear, it's still fresh in my mind. It was like a mattress, a blender, and a teddy bear with all kinds of household furniture. But I was like thinking, that's a kid's teddy bear. And I said, I got to write this book so that a kid today could read it, or I wanted this book to be timeless. I wanted 200 years from now, so people can read it and say, man, this book changed my life. And so I started writing with stories. And that's kind of what
did it take you to do it, Zach?
It took me so long, Steve. I exceeded and surpassed every deadline that was given to me. And I had to keep going. And I would do things like, my wife would like go rent me like a cabin, like in the woods that looked like where they filmed Friday the 13th. And then I would go to like a cabin in Lake George, and I would disappear for a weekend, and I would like abuse coffee and write for 3 or 4 hours, take a nap, write again. And I remember just going through it multiple times, and then I would have to add another story and another story. And I had listened to your book on audio, War of Art, before you had done the reading. Who was the gentleman that did the reading the initial time, where you just
I think it might have been George Guidell or something, but I'm not sure.
His voice was so like, it was like a punch in your face. And the thing that inspired me to finally finish it was when I think you said it differently when you read War of Art, but he said, type, the end. Rest in peace, motherfucker. And I was like, yes, son of a bitch. I was like so fired up. I was like, I am going to finish this book. And so it took me very long, because when that hurricane happened, the recession kind of hit our area. I lost like 60 or 70% of the members to my gym, because they had to go and fix a boat that was destroyed, a beach house. There was a power outage for like 14 or 17 days. So all of a sudden my money plummeted. Now I'm thinking to myself, I can't just write this book. I need to write and produce content online to make an income, because my gym, I just lost almost everybody. And you know what hit me about writing for money is my writing sucked. Because I was, what could somebody buy? What could it sell? And I've been
Right,
caught up in those things. When I make a
Uh-huh.
video and you say, is this a catchy title? And so anytime I find myself starting to fit in, I start to hate myself. I
Yeah.
start to feel like I'm a
Uh,
sellout.
uh-huh.
Oh, I'm writing what, quote unquote, they want me to write about. I'd rather impact, deep impact 100 people. And that's probably also why I coach at a high school and I run a private gym, because my gym, I don't want to conform to this way
Uh-huh.
of running a gym the way, quote unquote, normal guys
Uh-huh.
do,
Yeah.
even if it doubles my membership. And that's a downfall of mine, especially when you have a family. They say you're running a business to make money. But I tell the athletes, I go, if they're screwing around, I tell them I will burn this gym down. I tell them I will burn it down. And that's how I kind of feel with the writing, is that I don't want it to be so perfect. I want to take the reader on an emotional ride, and then I want them to laugh. I want them to cry. I want them to get inspired. I want them to feel. That's what I want them to do. And I feel like if you're just scrolling through Instagram and Facebook and all this crap, you're just like a zombie. But when they read, I want them to feel like they can do something. Like you said, I'm going to go and lift something. Like on my desk, I always keep your Turning Pro book, because I just want, my friend told me like 20 years ago, he's like, Zach, some books, you need them on your desk just to see the title, because it's a reminder. And
Yeah.
so I set things up on my desk, and same thing with the writing, so that people can they see my email coming through and it makes them say, I better read it, or I better, how can I, so I flip it on myself too. Like, I'm not allowed to write an email unless I trained and did something worthy. Yeah, I know.
Do you feel, Zach, like you are, I don't want to say disciplining yourself, but like that you're sort of the boss of your own self?
Yes.
And you're setting a kind of a schedule or a level of aspiration for yourself that then you have to kind of live up to, and you won't let yourself fall. In other words, you're sort of coaching yourself. Do you feel that?
100%. Yeah. And it's, my experiences in life shaped me and molded me into this. Like I wrestled in high school for 4 years, but then I stayed involved with wrestling and coaching since then, but it changed my life. And so when I read about you were in the Marines, or you lived in that cabin with no bathroom, it was shitty, but it made you stronger and tougher. Did it not?
Definitely.
Having like
adversity is always good. Yeah.
100%, because I think comfort is the enemy. You're comfortable. Now you've got, I know my buddy Joe DeSena interviewed you maybe 2 years ago. I think they went out and met you in like Santa Monica area. And so Joe,
interrupt you just to tell you a funny little thing that he did.
Yes.
This was pretty cool. They were filming it. It was on the beach.
Yes.
It was me and Joe and a couple of his, assistants and stuff.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, a helicopter was coming by, flying low. And so Joe sort of made this thing like, oh, here comes Pressfield now. Here comes his helicopter.
Yes.
And I don't know how they cut it together, but
they said, I think you said they're looking to arrest Charlie Sheen. Like that. And I think
that's true. When you see a helicopter out here, it's because Charlie Sheen just got arrested.
I think either right before or after he interviewed you, he interviewed, his pen name is Mark Owen, but his name is Matt Bissonette. He wrote that book, No Easy Day, which was, did you read that book?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. When I used to like drive a lot, I would listen to those books on audio. And so those books also inspired me, because when you hear about their training, it like pulls you in. And
doesn't it?
Yeah, you feel like you're right there.
Do you think of yourself as a warrior in any sense?
I like to think I aspire to be, but then I feel I'm very careful to utilize that word, as you know, right? Because it can be offensive to some people might say, are you a warrior if you're not in the military on the front lines? But there's the warrior, archetypes, as you speak about. I I don't know if I could, the answer would be no, but I like to train myself as if I always call it training for life. I'm keeping that sword sharp. And so I'm always trying to keep that mental and physical edge. The warrior.
I would call it. That's what I would call a warrior, even
Yes.
though, I mean, it's sort of an interior warrior, I
It
think.
is. That's where absolutely I agree. You're training yourself to be very different. You're away from conformity. You're not being quote unquote normal or what I call common folk. You're doing things that are outside your comfort zone. And when I started writing in my late teenage years for school, I remember, so senior year, I remember writing about that for the college. I remember the guy gets in my car and he's telling me where he's from and, could kill a man with his hands. And I'm like, oh my God, or I might have to fight this guy in my car, writing about it. And so I remember the teacher saying, I felt like I was in your car when you were talking about that. But that I try to run towards or move towards the things that make me uncomfortable. Do I always do it? No. Do I always succeed? Absolutely not. But for me, the key is I'm always pushing forward. It allows me to have self-respect. Before yes. I could, and I feel like that gives me the permission to write in a way that could inspire people. I can't write it would be like an out of shape person trying to tell people how you have to get in shape. I like to just live my truth. There's a book out it's called Live Your Truth, which is to me it's what's in your heart, what is it telling you to do? And sometimes that's the toughest thing, because your heart is telling you to follow a certain path. And as a entrepreneur, deep down, you're like, well, does that thing actually, produce? Does it make the money? And I had a friend telling me, this guy's a real high-level entrepreneur. He's like, Zach, if you weren't an entrepreneur, he goes, I bet you'd still be writing and making videos. He's like, that's what you do. You want to inspire people. And I was like, you're right. That's probably what I would be doing. I'd be trying to help people in some strange way, trying to get them to exercise and move. And even with writing, I tell coaches, you should all have your own book. You should write a book and share transformation stories of people you've trained, share why you've been transformed. And that should be your business card. You should write a small book and do it. And I'm amazed at how many people just won't do it. And I say, look.
Called resistance.
Absolutely. And every time I do a seminar, I gift your book, Turning Pro. And to me, I always tell them, I go, Turning Pro, it's like you talk about the line of when you changed from amateur to pro, and you remember that moment. I remember the moment where I used to struggle with depression, and I always said, I drew a line in the sand and refused to go back. And I feel like this Turning Pro, we can struggle with it forever. It's like a boxing match that never ends. A new round starts every day, and resistance, comes out at you. And ironically, I spoke to you about Ultimate Warrior. He used to call Mr. R. He'd say, Mr. Resistance is waiting for you. And he's like, grip that baseball bat and swing that mother effer. He said every day it's resistance that's trying to stop you. And people can be paralyzed by it. They can completely stop.
Absolutely. I didn't know that about the Ultimate Warrior, but let me say a couple of encouraging things, what I think to you, Zach, hearing you talk tonight. When you tell that story about the guy that got into your car at McDonald's,
I remember 1992.
I started writing too, where I sort of found, certain stories that happened to me in real life. And I just thought, I got to write this down, and then for no particular reason, just it seemed like a crazy thing that happened. And then once you start to write it down, like you say, you start to fictionalize it a little bit. You start to say, well, this isn't quite as interesting as it should be. Let me take it to another level. And
Yes.
and so you start doing that. But the other thing that I admire about you, and I think that you're really doing right, whether you understand it or not, is you're really a depth kind of a guy. I mean, I can see that when you sit down to write, you really want to get into it. You sort of surrender to it and just kind of go with wherever it's taking you.
Yes.
And I think I imagine that's how you train too, when you're sort of freelancing it and what's today going to
Yes.
be? I don't even know what I'm going to do today.
I
And I
love
think
that. It's
that's a great
freedom.
thing because you're really, I talk about the muse, I talk about the goddess, right? Which is
Yes.
really your unconscious, your instincts, that following your bliss or whatever it is. And I think that's your natural way of working, it seems to be. And I think that's a great thing. I don't ever listen to anybody that tells you to, regiment yourself or make a plan or anything, because I think when you are kind of writing and you're sort of following, oh, maybe I'll tell this story or I'll invent something, that's really the best part of you leading you, you know,
Yeah.
and
I
I
feel
would
it.
encourage you to follow that. And at one point you'll look up and you'll say, shit, I really got something good here, maybe
I
then I'll have to push it into shape a little bit, but so I think that's great.
I love it. Yeah, I feel that you're very right with the training and the writing. It's freedom. It's a lot of freedom. It's
Can you elaborate on that? Because, like, Jocko Willink always says, discipline is
discipline
freedom.
equals freedom. Yes. So my
Would you,
schedule,
would you
um,
agree with that or not?
well, what happens is when you discipline yourself to do things, he simply means we're not always motivated. I'm not always motivated. You speak about that. That's what the pro does. You still show up and write. The one guy you said, he's like, thankfully, motivation shows up every day at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
right in front of my keyboard. So discipline is absolutely crucial, because if we only do what we like to do, a lot of times, how do I have a breakthrough is I have to face the thing I don't like to do. That might mean waking up early. It might mean eating a certain way. It might mean learning something that I'm not good at, especially as we get older. I'm 44 and I catch myself saying, I don't even want to learn this thing. Like, why do I want to learn a new thing? Why do I want to change? So for me, the discipline came from wrestling. My coaches and my environment shaped me. But the writing, ironically, is, I guess it's having discipline to be free, the discipline to not be regimented. This is how I have to write. My writing always, a couple, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, I started writing some fictional emails. I started writing, he trained in the woods, and I wrote about like Eugene in the woods. I don't know Eugene, but I imagined that one. I say to the kids, I go, guys, and they're like, act crazy. I go, when I burn this gym down, I'm going to a cabin in the woods. No cell phone. You want to reach me? Smoke signals. And I just
Uh-huh.
picture myself in the woods with a dog, a barbell, my ability to go fishing. And so I started kind of imagining, what would that be like? So I wrote about this guy in the woods and made pretend I was visiting him. People were responding back like, I can't remember what his name was. I'll have to look it up. But if I called him Eugene, and now I'm writing about Trucker John, like nobody just he's not just John,
Uh-huh.
it's like, farmer, this guy. There's always like this thing. And so I kind of, my discipline in life, I think, gives me this freedom to write. There's like an
Uh-huh.
irony to it. It's strange, and some things I can't even explain. And I also think I'm not. I've I've been like all people. We go through things in life, and certain things can scar you, or certain things can spur you to want to do things. And I think my experiences of how going to these different gyms, how training changed me, how meeting certain people changed me, and reading those books of those early days, like not just reading the book, Steve, but the black and white photos in Arnold's books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Here's the thing about them. They were not posed. They were not Arnold, stop and hold this. They were all like raw. And of course they were black and white, which made something about it like seem even more special. And then I felt like every photo told a story. There was like, I could look at the photo and I could hear the weights. I could hear the guys talking. And so, you know, I try to do that when I post photos. I try to do that when I write. And I remember in my early 20s, I spent 2 weeks in California because I wanted to move to California so badly from watching Pumping Iron and reading about this stuff. And I would go to Venice and Santa Monica every day. And I went by the original Gold's Gym. I think now somebody has it as a home. But I went by the original and I just stopped. And I didn't hear any of the cars. And I just like put my ear near the concrete wall. And I felt like I could hear the weights. And I heard Arnold laughing and saying, "Come on, Franco." And, you know, Franco talking with his Italian accent. I was like hearing it. And so those early years, like experiencing magic from books and pictures and things, I've tried to let my words, and if I post photos, something has to come out. I want it to like
actually
hit people.
It's working, Zach. You know, you do have those photos, and you reading them, you do get that feeling.
Yeah.
So it's working, whatever you're doing. I remember
there
was a sentence, I think, in Arnold's book where he said, I think it was like the first time he went into a gym, and he said it looked like medieval torture equipment. Do you remember that? And he thought that was great. That was like the greatest thing it could possibly be, that, you know, you were going to be tortured in this thing.
It was like a torture chamber. He said, he goes, I'd have some of my best workouts in these dumps, he called them. Yeah. What, you know, Steve, sometimes I kind of like go all over with, you know, with my talking. I don't know if I've heard you speak or write about like books that changed your life, or maybe a movie that you saw that like kind of made you, you know, go to this next level or a deeper place. Do you have any books or movies that?
I do. I mean, I'm not sure anybody would be able to relate to these things, and I don't know if anybody's even heard of these books. But did you ever read On the Road by Jack Kerouac?
No, but I've heard you speak of Jack Kerouac. On the Road. Okay.
I mean, I don't think On the Road will hold up today. If you read it, it'll look dated, but it was, I think it was written in like 1948 or something like that. And it was about this guy who came out of the war, young Jack Kerouac, and he decided to kind of immerse himself in America. He was kind of in love with America, and he just wanted to get out on the road, hitchhiking. You know, he wanted to work on farms. He wanted to meet girls. He wanted to gamble. He wanted to get beat up. He wanted to sort of just, you know, like a poet, just plunge himself into this night. He wanted to drive to Las Vegas at 140 miles an hour, you know.
That's great.
He had this buddy named Neil Cassidy, who he gave him another name in the book, Dean Moriarty. But the guy was just sort of a Paul Newman character, but real. You know, the guy that would go into a pool hall in Shreveport, Louisiana, and walk out with the prettiest girl, and, you know, whatever. And so the whole thing was sort of about hurling yourself into this kind of American night, the whole great country, and just sucking up experience and life, you know?
Yes.
And so, I mean, I sort of tried to live that way. I did not succeed, but it inspired me to do that.
Wow.
And the odd thing, I think I wrote about this somewhere, is when I finally got an agent and sold a book, it was the same agent that Jack Kerouac had, a guy named Sterling Lord, who just turned 100 about on September 3rd.
It's amazing.
And he's still my
working.
agent.
Yeah.
He's still making deals. But that's one book. And another book that was sort of like that. Have you ever read any of Henry Miller?
No.
Tropic of Capricorn?
I think I've heard of that book.
It's too bad that these things have gone. Tropic of Capricorn.
Okay.
Henry Miller was a guy that from Brooklyn, who was kind of a real womanizer. chasing women this way and that everywhere, and was basically living at the poverty level in a crazy sort of skirt chasing way in Brooklyn, and then moved to Paris.
Wow.
And always wanted to be a writer. And you know what would be interesting for you, Zach, is when you read this book, he tells it in the first person. He's talking about himself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. And as you're reading it, you're saying to yourself, I know there's no way this guy did all this shit, you know? I know he's making this stuff up. But he's so funny and he's so convincing. And he's such a great writer. I mean, just the words are just that. So again, I sort of tried to emulate him too.
Yeah.
And I never could. I was just an idiot, you know? But I tried to sort of live that life. So those books really influenced me. And it's kind of sad that nobody today, like I'm talking to you now, and you haven't read the books or heard of them. Nobody else has either. It makes me feel like, I don't know.
I love reading. I think that the toughest thing for me has always been, and this is interesting because sometimes I catch myself, you know, I read your book, it's like I work a lot. I'm running the business and then I'm coaching somewhere else. And, you know, Joe DeSena always says, he goes, that, you know, that's the thing. Your back is never against the wall. He's like the movie Cinderella Man. He talks about why people don't really want to work so hard is because they're not fighting for milk. Like the guy, like
it's what you said about breakdown and then breakthrough, you know?
Yeah. And
so let me change the subject. I got to go in a few minutes. So let me change the subject to a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Israel.
Yes.
Tell me about your connection to Israel. Sure. And I'll tell you mine.
Yeah. So I was born in Israel.
Oh, you were?
Yep. And we moved to the Bronx when I was 11 months old.
Ah.
So my dad's dad would, you know, tell him, look, America is the land of opportunity. This is where you need to go. And so I don't know what his exact plan was. And I think my aunt had already moved to the Bronx, and I'm not sure why they went from Israel to the Bronx.
Yeah, it's usually the other way. Yeah.
Yeah. So they always say I learned to walk on the airplane to America.
Uh-huh.
And so my mom's parents, my grandparents lived in Israel, and my dad's mom lived in Israel. My dad, his dad moved to America. They divorced. And I remember as a young kid, not even knowing like, what the hell is a divorce? Like, you know, I didn't really get that. And so every few years, we would go to Israel and stay at my mom's parents. And my grandfather really inspired me with everything. And so I remember going to Israel probably around age 6. And then I spent a whole summer there. I think it was the summer before 3rd grade. So I was 8 years old, my brother and I. And then we would go kind of like these every 2 to 4 years. And when I was 18, I competed in the Mr. Israel, young Mr. Israel bodybuilding show, 18 and under. And so I haven't been to Israel since the last time I went was when I was like kind of my first serious girlfriend. I was 22. Both of my grandparents at the time were alive. We spent 3 weeks there. I went for 2 weeks. You mentioned Paris. It's all a blur. I think I was 26. I went to Paris for a few days alone, and then I went to Israel for 2 weeks. And so that was the last time I had been there. But my grandfather, why it was so tough. You know, my grandparents escaped the Holocaust, and so from Poland. And so my grandfather was in the Polish army. They escaped the Holocaust.
Did they go to Israel from there?
Went to Russia.
Ah.
Okay. Then my grandfather was in the Russian army, and my older brother from America went back to Israel to go into the Israeli army. So my older brother would tell me stories, and he would say that, like, you know, you're in Hebrew, you call your grandfather Saba. And he said Saba, when he was in the Russian army, they were outnumbered, you know, with weapons against the Germans, like 10 to 1, you know, so like 10 Germans would have guns, and then the Russians, like one guy would have guns, everybody else would have like a knife. And then from the Russian army, from Russia, they went to Israel. And so when I learned more stories of my grandfather, I realized he would, you know, sometimes he was set in his ways. He would set in his ways. You know, he was always like, he had this kind of work schedule. Then when he was retired, it was like, wake up, have toast with, you know, cheese on it. Then he grew all these fruit trees around the house. He made his own wine. He had a pomegranate tree, an orange tree, you know, the grape trees. Then in the evening, he always sat right next to a radio and listened to the news. Then watch the news, you know, because of everything in Israel. And so, you know, I'm in Israel and you see fighter jets flying over your head all the time. So it's been a long time. It's been about 20 years since I've been there. You know, my parents still have the house that my grandfather essentially built. It was just like a 1-bedroom. And so he expanded it. It's in a small town called Kiryat Tivon, which is like 25 minutes from Haifa. So, and then when my brother was in the military, he had done security in the old city in Jerusalem. So my brother had taken me there. I have friends in Israel because my father and mother were in the army. And so my dad's friends had sons, kids my age. So they would take us all around. And so what was so interesting too, Steve, is being around and seeing this little country always at war. Everywhere you go, you see the soldiers hitchhiking. You go to a wedding, everybody has a gun in their back pocket. Or you go to the mall and everybody's got, you know, a machine gun across their chest.
Yeah.
And so I'm about 45. When I lived in North Jersey, I was about 35 minutes from New York City. So when 9/11 happened and I saw everybody come together, I had seen that togetherness whenever I would go to Israel.
Yeah.
Of course, now we see such separation here.
Yeah.
It's ironic. So yeah, I was born there. Everybody in my family was born there except for my youngest brother. And my first and middle name I'm named after my grandfather's 2 brothers who were lost in the Holocaust. So as I got older, I learned why my grandfather would be so set in his ways. He had legitimately gone through hell. And so when I'm going through a tough time, Steve, my question is to myself, are you escaping the Holocaust? No? Then you don't really have anything to stress out about. Like you have a roof over your head, food on the table. And so I always utilize memories of my grandfather, my grandmother to inspire me to work. And I think that's why part of me why I work so much is it's almost like this feeling of, am I making him proud? Is my effort
that's interesting.
proud? Yeah. So what about you?
Well, I wrote a book a few years ago.
Yes, I have it.
Lionsgate.
Yep.
That was about the 6-Day War of 1967.
My father was in that.
Yeah. What branch of the service was he in?
He was in a tank unit. So we have photos of him like with the tanks and like the missiles on them. I'm not sure what the exact name of the unit was, but I think I remember when you were writing it. And by the way, Steve, I was going to ask you this question. We'll have to come to it later. I asked you to do a podcast 5 years ago, and you didn't want to do a podcast. You were like,
I've been against them forever. Now I've changed my mind.
Yeah, so it's interesting. But I remember when you were writing the book, I was like, oh, I could put you in touch with my dad if you ever, wanted to. So I believe what happened in that experience was my dad was out of the army, but you're in the reserves for a very long time.
Yeah.
And my mom said that what year was the 6-Day War, Steve?
67.
67. And so they were like outside on the stoop of the house, and the soldiers came up and do whatever they do to tell them, like, you're going to war.
Yeah.
There
was apparently there's a bunch of ways they do that, but one of the things, a category 8, was when they would knock on your door, you left right then. Grab your toothbrush.
I think that may have happened. I'll have to ask him.
Yeah, but people wanted to go, of course, because they wanted to defend the country.
There was such like pride. Here. The pride is just what hits me of what I've seen with Israelis. It's It's quite impressive. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to
You're over
really
there, as
describe
you
it.
know, and you see how small the country is. You know,
Yes.
I remember one of the first nights I was there. The guy named Danny Grossman, who was sort of guiding me around, he took me out to this knoll right behind his house, and we could see the lights of Tel Aviv. You know, not that far away. I mean, 8 miles, 7 miles away,
Yeah.
well within artillery range. If you had artillery right there, and he said, you know, this knoll that we're standing on right now, in 1967, this was Jordan. This, you know, it's Israel now, but it was Jordan then.
Yeah.
So when you see how small, that's their enemy, right? That the enemy could just shell your main city, you know?
It's smaller than New Jersey.
Sit around like here.
It's smaller than New Jersey. Last time I was there, Steve, was when there was all those bus bombings in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So when I flew home, you know, I'm on the 747, like the 3 aisles. There was like barely anybody on the plane. And I remember it happened about a week before I went home. The security was through the roof. So I remember being with my friends. They're driving me around. You know, the cops have those spikes in the streets. They're pulling people over.
Yeah.
The security is on another level. It was, but I haven't been back since. And it's tough. It's a lot, like there's so much, like, it's just tough. I definitely need to go back, take my kids back there. I think the best thing is when you have friends that really take you to the.
Yeah, definitely. Makes all the difference in the world.
Yes.
Zach, I've got to cut it short. I don't want to be, it's late for you. It's late for me, but you know, we'll revisit this. We'll do this again.
Yes.
Well, you can interview me. I'll interview you.
Yes. This was great, Steve.
It's great to meet you. I hope I get to meet you in person before too long.
Absolutely. Steve, thanks, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
I completely believe in you, Zach. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, man.
You're the best. Thank you, Steve.
You are.
Bye, guys.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.